The first time she said it, I thought I had misheard. Let's see what you can handle. Her voice was low, almost playful, but there was something sharp underneath it, something that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I remember the way the afternoon light fell through the curtains, cutting the room into stripes of golden shadow. I remember the ticking clock on the wall, louder than it had any right to be. And I remember how I suddenly didn't feel like a kid anymore. I was 17 that summer. Old enough to think I understood the world, young enough to still be wrong about most of it. My mom trusted her more than anyone. Her name was Nadia. She had been my mom's closest friend since college, someone who had stood beside her at her wedding, someone who had held her hand when my father died, someone who came over every week like she belonged in our home just as much as we did. To me, she was always just Auntie Nadia. Until that day, it started like any other visit. My mom had to leave for a last-minute shift at the clinic, and Nadia had offered to stay back for tea. I was home alone, pretending to study for exams that felt more like distant thunder than an immediate storm. "You should take a break," she said, stepping into my room without knocking. I looked up, startled. "I'm fine," she smiled, leaning against the doorframe. "No one studies that hard without losing their mind." "I'm not losing my mind. Not yet," she said lightly. There was nothing strange about the conversation, nothing obvious, at least. But something had shifted. I couldn't explain it then, only feel it. The way her eyes lingered a second too long. The way her tone carried a quiet challenge. She walked further into the room, glancing at my books, my notes, my messy desk. "You've grown," she said. I shrugged. "I guess." "No," she said softly. "I mean it. You've changed." I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever said it like that before. Then she stepped closer. Too close. And that's when she leaned in slightly, her voice dropping just enough to make my chest tighten. "Let's see what you can handle." At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. My mind raced through a dozen possibilities, none of them clear, all of them unsettling. "Handle what?" I asked, forcing a laugh that didn't sound like mine. She straightened up, her expression shifting instantly back to normal, almost as if nothing had happened. "Pressure," she said. "Life. Responsibility. You're almost an adult, aren't you?" I nodded slowly, though something in my gut told me that wasn't all she meant. That day passed without anything else happening. She made tea, we talked about exams, she left before my mom came back. If someone had asked me that evening, I would have said everything was normal. But it wasn't, because once you notice something like that, you can't unnotice it. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention. Nadia came over often. Sometimes she would bring sweets, sometimes just stories from her work. She laughed easily, spoke confidently, and had a way of making every room feel smaller when she entered it. But now I saw the details I had missed before. The questions that felt a little too personal. The comments that carried a hidden weight. The way she would sometimes test my reactions, throwing out a statement and watching closely, as if measuring something invisible. "How do you deal with stress?" she asked one evening. "I don't know. I just deal with it." That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. She smiled. "You'll need better ones soon." Another time, she said, "People will push you harder than you expect." "I can handle it," I replied quickly. She tilted her head. "Can you?" Each conversation left me slightly off balance, like I was being nudged towards something I couldn't yet see. At first, I thought she was just trying to help, preparing me for adulthood in her own intense way. But then came the day everything changed. It was a Saturday. My mom had gone to visit a relative out of town, and Nadia had stopped by unexpectedly. "You're alone?" she asked. "Yeah." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, placing her bag on the table. "Good," she said. That single word sent a strange chill through me. We sat in the living room. The silence stretched longer than usual. Then she looked at me, really looked at me. "Tell me something honestly," she said. "Okay, what do you want to become?" I hesitated. "I don't know. Something successful, I guess." "That's vague. I'm still figuring it out." She leaned forward slightly. "No, you're avoiding it." "I'm not." "You are." Her voice wasn't angry, but it was firm, uncomfortably so. "You hide behind, 'I don't know,' because it's safe," she continued. "Because if you don't choose, you can't fail." "That's not true," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "It is true," she replied calmly. I felt something tighten in my chest. "You don't know me like that," I said. Don't I? She asked. There was that look again, that measuring, searching look. Then she said it again. Let's see what you can handle. This time, I understood. Not in the way I had first feared, but in a deeper, more uncomfortable way. She wasn't talking about anything physical. She was talking about pressure. About truth. About confronting the parts of myself I avoided. Fine, I said, my voice sharper than intended. What do you want from me? I want you to stop pretending, she said. I'm not pretending. Then prove it. How? Answer me honestly, she said. What scares you? The question hit harder than I expected. I don't know, I said automatically. She raised an eyebrow. I exhaled, frustrated. Failure. Okay, I'm scared of failing, of choosing something and being bad at it, of disappointing my mom, of wasting time. The words spilled out faster than I could stop them. She nodded slowly. That's better, she said. I felt exposed, like I had just opened a door I didn't know how to close. You think you're alone in that? She continued. Everyone is scared. The difference is what they do with it. And what do I do with it? I asked. You run from it. That's not fair. It's accurate. Her words stung, but I couldn't deny them. You've been coasting, she said. Doing just enough to get by. Telling yourself you'll figure it out later. So what if I am? Later becomes never, she replied. Silence filled the room. For the first time, I didn't feel confused or unsettled. I felt challenged. You think I can't handle it, I said quietly. She met my gaze. I think you haven't tried. That hit harder than anything else. Because deep down, I knew she was right. That night, after she left, I couldn't sleep. Her words kept echoing in my mind. What do you want to become? What scares you? You haven't tried. For the first time, I stopped running from those questions. I sat at my desk, staring at a blank page, and forced myself to write. Not what I thought I should want. Not what others expected, but what I actually wanted. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clear, but it was honest, and that was a start. The weeks that followed were different. I studied with intention instead of obligation. I asked questions instead of avoiding them. I made choices, even small ones, and accepted the risk that came with them. Nadia noticed. You're changing, she said one evening. I smiled slightly. You said I already had. Now you're proving it. Her tone was different now. Softer. Less like a test, more like acknowledgement. Why did you do it? I asked. Push me like that. She was quiet for a moment. Because no one pushed me, she said finally. And I wasted years because of it. I hadn't expected that answer. I saw you heading down the same path, she continued. I didn't want that for you. I nodded slowly. For the first time, I saw her not just as my mom's friend, but as someone who had her own regrets, her own lessons learned the hard way. Did it work? She asked. I thought about it, about the fear I had faced, about the choices I had started making, about the person I was slowly becoming. Yeah, I said, it did. She smiled. Not the sharp, challenging smile from before, but a genuine one. Good, she said, because life won't get easier. I know, but you'll get stronger. I looked at her, understanding now what she had meant all along. Let's see what you can handle. It hadn't been a threat. It had been a challenge. An invitation to grow, and maybe, just maybe, a way of saying, I believe you can do more. Years later, I would think back to that summer often. Not because it was easy, but because it was the moment everything shifted. The moment I stopped waiting, and started becoming. And every time life tested me, every time I faced something difficult or uncertain, I would hear that voice again in the back of my mind. Calm, steady, unyielding. Let's see what you can handle. And instead of fear, I would feel something else. Resolve. Because now, I finally knew the answer.